I like to listen to myself talk, and so they said, you know what, you need to be an evangelist talking about IGEL. So they gave me this title. I've actually been working with the IGEL product in one way or another since fourth quarter of 2001. So I'm in my 20th year working with the company and watching an amazing product grow here. I'm going to go through. Everybody told me, it says, let's do demos. Demos are more important than slides, but so I have like 30 slides. I'm going to go through them, like hopefully maybe in about 5-6 minutes. We'll see how we do. I'm going to kind of tell you who IGEL is for those of you who don't know what we do and why you should care about us and how you can get started and play with this yourself. So that being said, IGEL is a company. It's a 30-year-old company. We were founded in 1989. IGEL is an acronym, so I always tell people always do it in uppercase. And if you're really good, you can work on your German and do Innovative Gesamtlösungen in der Mikroelektronik, which would be the proper pronunciation of IGEL. It means innovative solutions in microelectronics is where it came from. We opened up a small satellite in the US in 2001, which is strangely when I got involved with selling the product and working with the product. We've been growing like crazy. 10 years ago, we started to make inroads in the market. We said there were some disruptions in the market with competitors, companies like Weiss being bought by Dell and IBM selling into Neoware, and then HP buying Neoware, and a variety of things going on gave us an opportunity to move in. And in 2019, IGEL had moved to number 3 in terms of the thin client operating system sales. And prior to COVID, we were projected to move to number 1 or number 2 in the industry in our space. COVID kind of put an interesting twist on everything for a lot of us. So moving on there, we are an industry leader. We look at it, we have kind of a green vision in the sense that we want to transform the way the world works. We see things moving to a cloud. People's organizations, our planet, and everything can benefit from this. And so our vision is to be part of that. And the way we're going to do this is we have this operating system that we've developed over the years. And it is now, we call it IGEL OS because the world needs another iOS. But it's specific to connecting to cloud workspaces like Windows Virtual Desktop. So technology changes the way we work. It's done this for centuries, right? It's a new technology comes along. The telephone, for those who've been around long enough, there was a time when it actually had little dials on it. And, my kids have no idea what that is. But anyway, that's now all moved to mobile. The floppy disk, which I held up earlier, is now moved to cloud storage. I don't know what to do with the floppy disk. I don't know if I have a floppy drive. Obviously, cameras have gone from print and analog to digital and storage. And of course, money has changed as well, or is in the process of changing, or so it seems. But do you remember? Well, we were talking about this earlier, so I'm sure you remember the early days of Microsoft, okay, and DOS 1.0. And then along in 1995, on August 24th, we introduced Windows 95, and that was a big change, maybe not as big a change as Windows NT underneath. And then, of course, on September 30th of 2019, another defining moment when Windows Virtual Desktop was released. Okay, and then the world changed again for a lot of people, and us in particular, on January 25th of 2020. When Microsoft and IGEL announced and we released the first production version of the first Linux-based RD client for Windows Virtual Desktop. And I say the first because it is the first one built on Microsoft technology. There's been free RDP and other open source projects for years, but never before had Microsoft actually embraced Linux. So this was a big defining moment, and we were there. So we see a future, and we firmly believe that cloud is where it's going. We are in the early stages of adopting it. We think Microsoft's commitment to Windows Virtual Desktop and things like Microsoft 365 are really setting the stage for where we're going. No longer will I run around with the PC. Everything will just be in the cloud, and I'll just connect to it, okay, which is where IGEL OS comes in. So, and that's where our operating system is the difference maker, okay? So it is an operating system. We do make a physical thin client because that was our legacy, if you will. But thin client's the same as a PC. It's just got a different processor. It's got the same memory, same storage. But that makes up, maybe today is making up about 20% of our business, and that's shrinking. So, and we don't really care because it's all about the software. So IGEL OS is consumable on any 64-bit x86 device that you have today. It's consumable on something called a UD Pocket, which is a live USB stick that has the IGEL operating system on it. I call it a parasite because it needs a host to run on. And then there are a number of people out there that are manufacturing devices, be it Lenovo, LG, and others, are actually manufacturing and preloading IGEL OS on those devices. So you can take IGEL, you can go download IGEL, you can directly install it onto machines that you already have. If you have an old laptop or an old PC that at least meets the 64-bit x86 requirement, okay, there's a really good chance you can just run IGEL OS on that device. Okay, or you can go out and ask for one of the, and when this is over, somehow, some way, if you guys can send me an email, I can arrange to fire off one of these guys to you, and you can have your own little UD Pocket, and then you can play around with that. Okay, so important stuff. What have we done here? Okay, so I mentioned before we have a product that we include in IGEL OS that we call the IGEL Windows Virtual Desktop Client. Okay, it is built on RD Core. It was built and continues to be developed in cooperation with Microsoft. So we have requests, we suggest features, Microsoft adds it to RD Core, it comes back to us, we implement it. Been an amazing dance for the last 2 years. Okay, so what's in this and what do we have today? Well, okay, currently, and I'll share it with you in a minute. This is extremely easy to use. Obviously, I find the speed to desktop with Windows Virtual Desktop is amazing. It's proven to be, and I have lived it, for over a year and a quarter now. It's been very reliable. In fact, I actually prefer working in the Windows Virtual Desktop environment than I do running on a local system. So this is a struggle for me right now to be working with an actual Windows laptop. So anyway, supports multi-factor, session roaming, and all those pieces, okay? Our feedback, customers, very positive experience. If you get a chance to try it out, hopefully you will. You'll have that same experience. We support audio in and out. Access to storage, okay, and the ability to share a clipboard between sessions or between the local host and the remote, all built in here, okay. Other pieces, an important development about 7-8 months ago was the support for dynamic virtual channels. Our partnership with Zoom and what we've done with them, we convinced Zoom that they needed to port the Zoom optimization to Windows Virtual Desktop. We see Zoom and Teams being the dominant players out there in terms of unified communications today. And we see Zoom will always be there. Teams is going to be everywhere. We don't have Teams optimization yet, but it's Q2 21. And if you guys invite me back or I rejoin you in about 3 or 4 months, we could probably do this on Teams on my real desktop, and we don't have to be doing what I'm doing right now. We're working with other customers, partners, or whatever, the alliance partners like Lakeside and Liquidware and others that are integrating in as well. And a company called Fabulitech, which is another alliance partner, already has USB redirection, webcam optimization, and image scanning available for Windows Virtual Desktop. On the printing side, eZeep, which is a thin print brand, has developed their cloud print for Windows Virtual Desktop. It's pretty intriguing. It's built into IGEL OS. It works very, very well. And then we finally got print mapping support added to RD Core last month. So if we were doing this 2-3 weeks later than right now, I would tell you that we have print mapping support built into IGEL OS. So I'm getting my first copy of it next week. So that's pretty exciting stuff. On the roadmap, we know that UDP support's coming and then RDP short pass shortly after that. So we're looking forward to that. We're looking at integrations with Microsoft Identity and conditional access and ultimately kind of mapping and Intune for modern management. So while IGEL has a very powerful and compelling message when it comes to management, and we're going to leverage it because I can't get on my Linux system here and be a part of this meeting. We'll share it with you. So there are a lot of hidden features in the IGEL device. Okay, so things around, these are things that we've added on our side. The ability to store login credentials, which allows you to create kiosks, the ability to have a session launcher that we've developed that allows you to make decisions about what you want to run before you connect. We allow you to run multiple concurrent connections or launch single sessions, however you want to deal with it. There's a session toolbar that you can make available or not make available. It's up to you. And we can have a system automatically when someone logs off the desktop or the Windows remote Windows, it takes them all the way back to the default IGEL desktop. It doesn't just leave the system hanging available for the next person to come along and maybe hijack somebody's credentials. So we've also done a lot. We know companies like to brand themselves. So we've added features around corporate branding and other features around supporting the mouse middle click, which is dramatically different on Linux than it is in Windows. So, all right. That's kind of an overview of those pieces. If you want to get this, you can go to www.igel.com/WVD. That's hopefully you guys can remember that. If you go there, you'll get taken off to this page, all right? And you can come here and click on that free trial message there at the top. It'll get you a message here, and you can fill out this form about you want to have WVD client access. When you do that, we'll send you an email. That email will give you instructions on where you can go download our software so that you can install it, okay, on a machine that you have, okay, along with instructions on how to do that. Interestingly enough, when you get this download, it'll be an archive. If you unzip it, you'll see some important pieces in there. There's a manual. I suggest reading the manual. It'd be helpful. It's about 14 pages. It's not a hard read. There's pictures. And then we have a utility called Prepare Stick that'll build a bootable USB stick that you could use to install IGEL OS on another machine that you have. And then there's an ISO. And people say, ISO, interesting. If you build a virtual machine and you mount that ISO and you boot that ISO, it will install IGEL OS on your virtual machine, into a virtual machine for you, and you can run it there. So some things that are there. All right, so I mentioned read the documentation. That would be important to do. So I was going to tell you a little bit about our IGEL management and the fact that it's a real differentiator. But essentially it says any device that's running IGEL OS, if you're an IT person, you have complete control of that device no matter where it exists on the planet. If it's connected to the network, you have control of it, okay? Which is what's going to allow me today to share what an IGEL looks like to you. I won't go into too many details into this, but if we talk about why IGEL, people, in a nutshell, it boils down to this. We move our Windows our workload up to the cloud and run it on Azure, and we're running Windows Virtual Desktop. The big question is, why am I running Windows on the edge? And a lot of people come to us and say, it just doesn't make sense. I've gone to Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm now paying Microsoft to help manage Windows for me, to take care of Windows, which is interesting in itself, because I'll sit down one day and I'll see updates and things, which I'm sure you guys experience. But this is a wonderful experience, but I don't need Windows on the edge anymore. Well, IGEL comes in and gives you a predictable, reliable, stable operating system simply for connecting to that Windows Virtual Desktop. And that's probably the biggest thing. And when people actually do that, this is, I'm flipping through it real quick, but at the end of the day, when people run IGEL OS in the endpoint and move that workload to the cloud, the cost of maintaining that endpoint drops significantly. So this is an example of 100,000 devices. You're running about 250 hours a month, and the kind of savings, operational savings that people will experience, okay, when they put IGEL OS on the edge and run Windows Virtual Desktop in the cloud. So one of the things that we see very quickly is the hardware that we bought 10 years ago is still good. So all of a sudden, by moving to Windows Virtual Desktop, the time spent dealing with that endpoint is gone. It's reduced significantly. So IGEL OS, we'll say it's the only edge operating system you need for your Windows Virtual Desktop. Now, let's get to the important stuff. Let me see how we actually exit out of here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize.
Hey, Jeff, do you mind if I interrupt you real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Just, for everybody, for those of us that can reminisce about DOS and things like that, the original promise of thin clients was you'd get 10 years, you can use them forever. The problem was that the vendors tied their OS to the hardware. So they would stop supporting hardware. Those hardware clients would stop getting updates. They became bad. that's the beauty of what IGEL does, is it's a separate, they have their hardware, but the OS is completely separate, and it can run on devices from 10 years ago, and you can truly get the promise of thin clients now when before you never really could in the reality that the world was in.
Yes. I had to make a slight change here so this all fits on the screen. What we're looking at here is the IGEL management system, and it's kind of difficult to jump into this if you've never seen the IGEL operating system in action for this to make sense. So I just made a configuration change to the device that I'm going to demonstrate with. So I'm going to go ahead and shadow right here, right now. So, all right. So we're looking on the screen now. Hopefully you can see that. We're looking at an IGEL device. All right. I've got a message on here about it currently being shadowed. I'll move that a little bit out of the way so it doesn't bother us, but that lets whoever's using this machine know that they're being shadowed. Okay. But this is basically what an IGEL device looks like out of the box. Okay. And when you get a device, you'll come through here, you'll boot it up. There'll be a setup assistant. We're going to ask you to select the language and connect to a network and select the time zone area. And then that's about it. There'll be an opportunity to request a demo license. You should do that. And once you get that demo license, that's good for 90 days. And then we can talk about getting you a license for a longer period of time. But you have a full IGEL device, and you can configure and do everything you want. Once you get that, download that license, it'll come up and look like this. And we're going to go down here just to show you how easy it is to connect to Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm going to go down here on the quick launch area. There's a wrench that launches the IGEL setup utility. If I wasn't smart enough, I didn't know that. Microsoft taught us back in 1995 that this icon down here might be a start menu. If I click on that, I go up here to this gear and I'd get to that setup there. But once I'm here, we broke this out a little bit logically, or tried to make it logical. I've got this, we've organized this into sessions and accessories and user interface and the network and so forth, devices, and security. Sessions are things you connect to. If I actually expand this, I come down here, I say, Windows Virtual Desktop, okay? Well, with that being said, I have a section here for WVD sessions. I might say, hey, I want to go ahead and add a Windows Virtual Desktop session. At this point, I can give this a name. Well, we'll let it be WVD session, and it gives various start methods. I want an icon on my desktop. That's it. I'll go ahead and click on OK. Once I've done that, I now have an icon on the desktop, okay, and I can go over here, and if I launch that, okay, it launches our login menu, if you will, our login screen. At this point, I can actually type in some credentials that get me to a kind of a demo environment, okay. All right, and then I'll put in the password they gave me. And then I'll press enter. And this is now reaching out and logging me in. Famous last words. Because I didn't put in the right domain. This has really got me running. Okay, let's try again.
Oh, you are really imitating a real user. This is a great demo.
All right, easy. So here we are. And once I've connected, I'm now, the system comes back and says, these are all the systems that are available to me. So for example, I'll go down here and launch the 2020 Spring Update Desktop. I'll just click on that. And this is now connecting me to this Windows Virtual Desktop session. And I'd already been in here once and I had a browser running. So I can go ahead and maybe minimize that. And you'll see that we're actually sitting here on Windows Virtual Desktop. I mentioned before that we have this little drop-down menu. If I come up to here, okay, I can go into a windowed mode if I choose, okay, and that'll shrink this down, okay, or I could go back to full screen. I can minimize to the taskbar, or I can come over here and I can click on this little waffle-looking guy here, and this actually takes me back. Okay, to this, and I got my spring session here. If I wanted to run a session in Europe, I could click on here and launch the European session as well. Okay, and this is going to connect me to Windows Virtual Desktop running on servers in Europe. So, but now I have both sessions connected, okay? And I can move between them by going up here to that little drop down, going back down to this session. Let's go back over to the US side and I can work here as well. And we talked about things like that clipboard, copying, pasting, that's all there. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll go up here and I'm going to go ahead and disconnect. All right, and we go back. That is going to go ahead and disconnect that session. I'll go ahead and disconnect here. Okay, I'm still connected to EMEA, but it's going to go ahead and disconnect that automatically by virtue of me closing the session, and I'm now back to my IGEL desktop. So configuring that connection, okay, to Windows Virtual Desktop was nothing more than me going into IGEL setup, okay, and then configuring features on or off, or how I want the system to run. So my decision there was simply, how do I want to start this? If I want to change this to my, say, Azure desktops, I could do something like that, okay? I can go in here, I could store login credentials. I mentioned the kiosk mode, okay? I could store my login. I can say, this is the workspace I want to launch, okay? If I only have one workspace defined to me, it'll launch automatically. I don't have to worry about that. All right. I can go in, I can turn on that clipboard. Yep.
I think I see who it is.
That's all right. Anyway, we can turn on and off. So if I want to disallow storage redirection, so no access to local storage, I can turn that off or on. I can configure an outbound proxy if I need to go through a proxy. I can configure whether or not this is started in full screen or windowed mode. I can, if I want to go across multiple monitors or lock into a specific monitor, I can choose that. I can configure printing. Today, only thing I can do is enable eZeep if I wanted to. And then, of course, I have some plugins available. And I mentioned the Zoom VDI plugin is available, and as is the Fablatech plugin. So these are features that are here. But there are also lots of other features available in here. So, for example, we have our registry. It's not like a Microsoft registry, but I go down in here and I can get into some detailed, some very fine settings. Okay, so I can go in and define the Azure feeds, okay, that are giving me the information about what I can run. So we did find one day that Microsoft actually changed that in midstream, and we needed to be able to configure that. So make the change in our code. We decided to make it a variable in case somebody ever decided to do that on their own. So this is the IGEL interface when you're working with an IGEL device. Now, I'm shadowing this device. This is really kind of weird. I'm on a Windows machine connected, running this management console on this Windows machine. The actual management server I'm connecting to is running in Azure in US East, okay? I have a secure gateway sitting on Azure as well. So this shadow session is going through that secure gateway. So I'm shadowing this device from this Windows machine up through US East, back down into an IGEL device that's sitting next to me, which I would have shared with you if I could actually get to that desktop. So very powerful how we can go ahead and move this thing around, right, and do things. But inside this management system, okay, we get all sorts of flexibility here. So I wanted to say, hey, what if I wanted to take this device and I wanted to deploy this, okay, to the associates or the people that work in my company, and my company might be Microsoft. I'm going to take this management system, this device, and I'm going to move it into a container called Associates, which is under Microsoft. A lot like group policy, what I've done is I now have a series of configurations or what we call profiles associated with this device, okay? Profiles are policies, if you will. If I go down in here and I say, hey, I want to configure that Windows Virtual Desktop connection. Where is it? It's in here somewhere. Okay, I'm going to edit this object here. When I go in here, okay, working with a profile in the IGEL management system is just like working with that setup utility on the device. I come down here, I go to Windows Virtual Desktop. Okay, this is what I called it. I called it Microsoft WVD. Okay, I went to login. I have no login credentials here. I have options. Okay, so I've gone ahead and moved this device into this container, and I've inherited all of these settings. Okay. Remember I called it Microsoft WVD. I have two sessions here. Why do I have two sessions? Well, because I put that one session on the device when I was working when I was showing you how this works. So I'm going to go ahead down here. This is the session that was applied with a profile. It's locked. Okay. Basically, it's a policy. I'm going to go ahead and delete the session that I created here previously. All right. We'll save those credentials. The management system recognizes there's a change. I'll click on OK. We pop over here. We see a quick message say you got a configuration change, apply the setting down. And now we're back here. Okay. If I wanted to launch this session here, I've got the login set up. And remember that background was kind of blue and smoky. Well, I've changed it to something that's a little more familiar looking to some of us. I can now go in and log in using those credentials again, you know, and go ahead and get reconnected. All right. Hopefully, trust me, that'll work there. All right. Maybe I want to take this device and maybe instead I'm going to deploy this device to my engineers. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over to the engineers container. I'll let that setting take effect now. Okay. These have, again, policies or profiles associated with this. I've got my time server I configured. I got the secure shadowing configured. I have a local terminal here. I've set this up for my developers, and guess what I'm going to give them? So what's going on right now is I'm actually installing Edge on this device. Okay, it's now downloading Edge to this machine, and I will have Edge available to me running on IGEL OS. So we created a method, recognizing that we can't be all things to all people. People have needs. They'll want to use other tools. They want to be able to install their own software. Okay, and by doing this, I've gone in and reconfigured. We now have Edge on this device, automatically changed the wallpaper. All I did is associate this device with another container that has a series of different profiles, profiles being snippets of that configuration. Okay, if I wanted to go even further, I say, hey, let's take this device. I'm going to move it here into kiosk mode. Okay, I mentioned kiosk before, so I'm going to go ahead and say, let's move to kiosk. Okay, this device is going to immediately get reconfigured. I got a message here. I put that up there so people actually see that this is done. But what's happening right now is I'm removing Edge from the device because the kiosk system doesn't have Edge. Now the kiosk system is going to get a different kind of look because it's a kiosk. And frankly, what I did is I took the Windows Virtual Desktop client and I configured it to automatically launch on boot. So when the system starts up, it's going to go ahead and launch that session. And I've stored the login credentials as well, because if it's a kiosk, generally, you know, maybe it's going to run up and you're going to run some kind of customer-facing application. Maybe it's a touchscreen application. Maybe it's a browser-based application. Maybe it's something that's just going to sit up on the wall and display things. So I've gone ahead and done this. Now, first thing I'll say is you notice the taskbar is gone at the bottom of the screen. In fact, there would be nothing on this interface that I could do because this is a kiosk system. But because we had, in the interest of time, I went ahead and made it available and I could launch this as if I had just rebooted the device. Okay, if I was doing a kiosk, I probably would not show that drop-down menu up at the top. But this would be set up such that power went out, the device powers back on, somebody turns the device on, it boots up, it automatically logs in, automatically connects, okay? And if I'd gone in and had some application configured to automatically start, that application would automatically start as well. So real quick overview, you know, I'm about 3 or 4 minutes left. I mean, there is a ton to share, I should say. If I go back in here to this presentation, you know, we've got, I go back, I mean, if you want to, I think I was kind of done with the presentation aspect of it at this point. I suppose I should say, do we have any questions? And any questions I can answer about this whole experience?
We did have some questions in the chat, and I think we've been all talking amongst ourselves. I think they were answered probably, but if you want to take a look at that, but if you don't mind telling us how we can get that UD Pocket or USB stick again, I think some people were interested in that.
Well, I would love to tell you I had a nice little Microsoft form that you could fill out. Unfortunately, I don't. But there's a real easy way, you know, and just to send an email to this guy. All right, and he'll get you one. I need to know where to send it, so just send me your name, address, a phone number to attach to the shipping manifest so FedEx knows where to deliver it. But if you want to do that, we'll pop one in the mail and get it sent out to you. And then,
Give him Jed's private email. Come on.
well, Jay, you can always reach Jed. Jed Ayers is our CEO, and he likes to be accessible. Although he said he locked his phone in a safe this week. He's on vacation, so we'll see. We've not been able to reach him. So.
There was one question about the what people run into. Are people running into issues with the BIOS being locked down, where it doesn't let you boot up the USB stick of the UD Pocket? Have you seen that, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah. So a part of it, if it's Windows 10, it's pretty easy to deal with because when you hold down the Shift key and hit restart, right? It'll bring up the little option that will let you boot to an external device. And then you'd be able to select the UD Pocket at that point. We did, years ago, we went ahead and recognizing secure boot was going to kind of be a thing of the future. So we do take our bootloader and our kernel and have Microsoft sign that. So we submit it, it's reviewed, and then it's signed. And then, so the UD Pocket itself comes, it supports secure boot. So it's a Windows 10 system, it's required secure boot. So if you were to simply hold that Shift key down, but where we are today, if it's a UEFI device and it's Windows 10, you can hold that Shift key down, get to that option, select I want to boot external device, and then there's something that says IGEL UD Pocket. You select it and it boots. Okay. If you have a Surface, inside the Surface configuration, Microsoft has two secure boot methods. One is the secure boot only Microsoft certificates, and then there's secure boot third-party certificates that Microsoft has signed. So if you have a Surface, that change needs to get made. Otherwise, you can't boot to the UD Pocket with a Surface. So, but BIOSes, yeah, if a company has locked down the BIOS because it's a legacy BIOS, it'll boot just about anything you plug into it. You have to have that unlocked if you want to boot the UD Pocket.
All right, thank you. No, I don't see any more questions. Are you going to hang out a little bit if you could keep an eye on the chat? Okay, all right, great. Well, thank you so much. This was good stuff, and I'm excited to see the print mapping coming. That was stroked my fancy a little bit because I'm working on some print stuff that I could see the challenges. So thank you so much again, and I think we'll give a couple minutes here to get the other team set up. So we've got.
Yep, this is Dennis here from Microsoft, and I think Wasola was able to sneak in here as well.
I think so, yeah.
Yep, I'm here.
Let me get my screen shared. And while that's loading up, I'll just do a quick intro. So I'm Dennis Payne. I'm from Microsoft. Prior to coming here, I've been here for, a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And prior to coming here, I was a VDI kind of lead engineer in the U.S. federal space for about 8 to 9 years, doing some very large-scale VDI deployments and operations. With Microsoft, I'm from the ASCII Mission Infrastructure team. ASCII is the Special Capabilities Infrastructure and Innovation team. We kind of go after a lot of areas, space, Azure Orbital. Some folks might have seen in the news was just recently announced. My team specifically is the Mission Infrastructure team, so we're helping with kind of the explosion of WVD usage, given recent events. Or well, I guess I can't say recent anymore because it's been a year. So my team typically gets engaged with kind of serial number one type of deployments, special circumstances, other types of deployments where we are pushing the Azure platform in kind of new and interesting ways. For example, my team just released a open source Azure blueprint that deploys WVD and all of its dependencies with very minimal questions. So if you have like a greenfield environment that you're looking to deploy, or you're looking to do a proof of concept, that kind of thing, it's a really good solution. So if there's any questions about that, just shoot me a note and we can get you hooked up with that. My team thrives on feedback, which is kind of where the topic of smart card authentication for WVD came in. And let me just switch some stuff around. One of the main things of, or one of the main focuses of feedback that we've gotten is, well, let me start first with some context. A WVD session has two different things that need to get authenticated. First is the feed enumeration. That's the list of options that you saw in Jeff's demo of all the different desktops and applications that a user might be entitled to. That authentication goes to Azure Active Directory. And then once you actually make a selection of a desktop or an app or whatever it is that a user might want to launch, that's an RDP session. And that authentication goes back to Active Directory. So a lot of times that's going to be on-prem, or sometimes organizations will put that in their Azure tenant as well, and then run AD Connect to get a sync between that and their AAD environment and keep everything going good. So that's kind of the context. Now, there are a lot of users in the US federal space that are required to use smart cards. There's two different policy definitions there that cover a lot. I think there's probably a couple million users that are that fall under those two, and there's probably some others. And recently, there's also the pandemics that has kind of created a desire for a secure way to work from home. Obviously, that's been very, very critical for, and almost existential for a lot of organizations to be able to keep going through the pandemic. The problem is smart card authentication in RDP means you have to be able to do Kerberos authentication. And Kerberos needs line of sight with the domain controller to be able to actually do its authentication. And work from home users, they don't have that line of sight because there's usually a firewall or something in between the endpoint, either a work from home laptop or bring your own device kind of scenario between that device and the Active Directory domain controllers that are on site. Usually, it's not a good idea to run those out there on the public internet. Usually. So what we have been working on is a possible solution to that. There has been a particular feature of the RDS gateway role that has been around for ages and ages called the KDC Proxy. And it's a domain joined machine intended to sit on the edge. We'll come back to that in a second. That is able to proxy Kerberos transactions from whatever end client system you're sitting at outside of the organizational boundary back into the domain controllers on the inside. And this is targeting the RDP portion. So remember back to the context that I just brought up. This is going to target the RDP portion of the WVD session. We do have some other things that are coming soon that are going to go after the feed enumeration portion of the WVD session as well. There is some capability with ADFS that we can use, and then there's some feature enhancements on the roadmap that are going to be announced soon.
Hey, Dennis.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask real quick. Do you mind if there's questions in between, or should we wait until at the end?
Yeah, we've got just a couple more slides to get through, and then we can kind of tally up the questions, and then we'll just kind of blast through them at the end.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so KDC Proxy is exposed as a web service once you get it installed, and we'll get into how you do that in a second. Which means that you can put it behind a load balancer. So if you want to create multiple for resilience or scaling purposes, that's totally fine. And since it is a public-facing, or the KDC Proxy is intended to be a public-facing service, it is recommended to put a public cert on there from any number of certificate vendors that are out there. One other thing that is important to remember is a lot of PKI gets kind of drug into this. So the certs that the domain controllers use to do smart card authentication, the CDPs, the CRL distribution points need to be publicly accessible, which it's just a couple of small files, and they need to be exposed on a HTTP endpoint. So not a huge hill to get over, but it is something to kind of remember. So currently this supports just the RDC client only on the Windows for Windows 7 or 10, and then the KDC Proxy can be installed on server 2016 or later. Okay, and then I mentioned how to get one installed. It's just a role. There's the RDS Gateway service that that you can install on a just a server 2016 2019 machine, and then once you get it installed, there's just one configuration item that you got to set, and that's to deploy whatever cert you're going to use on that from whichever vendor that you've selected. And once that's there, then there's just a quick little configuration setting on the session host within the Azure portal to get the session host pointed to the external identity of that KDC proxy. So with that, I'll let Wasola step in.
Yep.
And, I can kind of keep driving with the slides. So just give me a shout when you want me to advance.
Yep, that's perfect. Great. So so this is what we would be looking at pertaining to selecting or configuring the KDC proxy RDP properties within the WVD host pool. So as you can see, these these quick steps, basically selecting the host pool that you're looking to configure, going to the RDP properties, selecting the advanced tab, and then adding the KDC proxy server name within the RDP properties. There are a few changes that we're going to be looking to do within the next, I would say, couple of months, which would actually allow you to configure the KDC proxy on its own, as far as like having its own selection here within the RDP properties pane under connection information. Thanks, Dennis. I see you wiggling your
Yeah,
point there.
Got my laser pointer out. That's right.
Yeah, so within connection information, there's actually going to be an ability for you to simply just type in your KDC proxy server name, and then it'll essentially, be configured the same way it does here within RDP properties. You can go ahead and hit next. So as of right now, this feature is in public preview. We are looking to go GA within the next month. So definitely be on the lookout for that. The documentation is already out on the WVD docs site. So this is where you would be able to find it. Some of the configuration that Dennis alluded to earlier pertaining to setting up the RD gateway role is right below the KDC proxy one, as you can see here with this screenshot. So it kind of goes into depth as far as, the reason as to why we are implementing this feature, and essentially how to go about configuring it. You can go to the next slide. So kind of brushing up a little bit on some of the things that Dennis discussed. Again, the reason as to why we are implementing this is because we want to be able to have devices that are outside the corporate net be able to access the domain controller, right? Obviously, we don't want the domain controller to reside on the public internet, so that's why we're looking to deploy KDC Proxy. Obviously, we're using leveraging the RD gateway role to be able to deploy it. And as Dennis stated earlier, it's as of right now, it's only available via the Windows client. And I think that's it for me, Dennis. Over to you.
Sure. So I kind of touched on some of this already. Clients do need to be able to trust the public and the private certificate chains that are used on either the DCs or the KDC proxies that you deploy. So just like I said before, the CDP and AIA for the certs does need to get published out. The cert trust chain, this is kind of a limitation of KDC proxy in general. The DC certificate that gets used does need to, the trust chain for that does need to be in the NT auth store of whatever client is connecting in. For a true work from home kind of scenario where it's like a home device or a non-commercial device, this usually isn't a problem. And obviously, if you've taken your work device home and are using that probably will already be there as well. But in some cases, particularly where like partner vendors and partnerships and that sort of thing are involved, if you have a client that's joined to a third-party domain, then sometimes it can be a little challenging getting that cert into there. So this definitely isn't a silver bullet solution, but it does kind of address being able to do smart card authentication in general in the first place. So one of the other challenges that we've come across, or kind of a thing that helps unblock some folks, is the mini driver that smart cards get installed with needs to be consistent the whole way through. So if you are using the inbox driver, so the one that comes with Windows, for your desktops inside the network, then that should work from the endpoint that you're trying to connect in from. However, a lot of folks will be using some specialized mini driver that unlocks certain features or whatever of this particular smart card that they have deployed. So that same mini driver would then need to be installed on the endpoint. So there's a command line utility, cert util, that can kind of show which driver is being used for the smart card. Just run that on a endpoint, and then you can kind of see if maybe there's a mismatch or something like that when going through troubleshooting. For those who don't know, RDP files are really just text files, and the reason I bring this up is if you are needing to confirm that the custom RDP properties have been actually put into the RDP file, you just open it up with a notepad, and then you'll be able to see that custom property that you typed into the portal will show up in a big list of all the other configuration items for a given session. For the WVD RDC client, the RDP files get stored in the path that's listed here. So you can just jump in there and check out the RDP files as you need. Like I mentioned before, the RDS gateway deploys it deploys the KDC service among other things. So depending on the security posture of your organization, there might be some things to turn off or just kind of things to be aware of if you're looking to do a surface area reduction kind of thing. Another option for this, if you're not comfortable with having a domain join system sitting right out on the edge of your environment, you could do a web application firewall or a web application proxy that sits logically in front of this that isn't domain joined, and then kind of only exposes the KDC proxy endpoint. Lots of different options for lockdown there. And then if you do decide to give this a shot, there are a couple of event log locations that are very useful when doing any troubleshooting. The CAPI2 log within event log, that's going to show the trust chain build out of all the certificates that are used. Pretty much every point in the connection chain will have relevant information there. And then the KDC proxy itself, that role has a event log as well. That'll show, it's able to see the domain controller and, it's receiving connection attempts and that sort of thing. So good information in both those locations. So some of the topics that I covered here, that we covered here, we've got additional information listed out. I'll just leave the screen here for a second and people can kind of screenshot as needed, or we can paste this into the chat in a second. The screenshot of the documentation page that Wasola showed, that's the top one there. And then there's some really deep dive type information for, the protocol that the KDC proxy uses, smart card technical reference, and then just Kerberos in general. Obviously, they're all pretty large topics, so this is kind of a good combination of doc pages to kind of get you started on this journey if this is something that you need to look at. So with that, I will stop sharing if I can figure out how to stop sharing. And then we'll take a look at those questions.
Looks like Jen may have been disconnected. She said she was having some issues. Sorry about that. So we can look through. There's a question from Travis on will this work behind Azure AD Gateway? I'm not sure if that was part of another conversation or not.
Yeah, I think I'll have to take that one and follow up later. I'm not entirely sure. There's a good possibility. I'm assuming that's a reference back to the fact that you can stick this as a web service behind load balancers or something like that. So I'll follow up with that.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. If anyone has questions, feel free to speak up, chat, whichever way you want to do it. You can unmute yourselves if you're muted and speak out.
Then Ben pointed out that the upcoming AAD only auth capability, that is exactly the roadmap item that I was talking about. So yeah, as that becomes available, that will be an additional set of options. Some orgs might like that better than KDC Proxy. Some orgs might want to stick with KDC Proxy. Maybe they already have one deployed, that kind of thing. So the intent is to have lots of options for folks.
Okay. Andrew does have a question in there. For the smart card support, is there any recommended best practices, setup and planning, or is that all in the docs?
So there's a good amount of context in the docs. The docs are a living document. So obviously, as feedback comes in, we'll continue to evolve those to meet whatever questions and things come up.
Okay. Procon smart card versus modern MFA authenticator.
So that is, I think, really going to be addressed by the roadmap for AAD join. Right now, the RDP session, I think, is limited in its ability to handle some of the newer, more modern authentication solutions. So as that, it's like a 3-phase rollout kind of thing. As those phases get rolled out, we'll be able to pick up more and more of the kind of more modern authentication solutions.
Now, for my question, would that be like when we're talking about modern MFA, we're talking about like the Yubico keys, what are they, the Google Titan keys or whatever, things like that, or like where you it's like a USB device, you can plug it in and have it, this is me or this is my device type, those types of things.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the direction that we're going. I don't know about any specifics on specific devices and models and things.
Yeah,
but that is kind of the intent, is to put everything behind AAD, and then AAD supports a whole bunch of different devices and things that you can use to get people in. At that point, you're not reliant on the point is to get away from the dependence on kind of legacy Active Directory.
Okay, great.
And then, as Thomas pointed out, the roadmap, the intent is to get to a place where we're enabled, where we are able to enable Windows Hello for Business as well. So all kinds of options there as well.
Yeah, and I think part of the discussion, Procon versus smart card versus more modern is going to be the business as well. What are their requirements? So especially like, I know this is kind of maybe outside a little bit, but government agencies, things like that, can get into all sorts of squirrely.
Sure, absolutely.
Security. Yeah.
So I said I've been in the U.S. federal space for eight or 9 years. Some of that or actually most of that is with the DoD. I'd say if that was 8 or 9 years that I've been in there, I'd say for 6 to 7 of those years, there's been a persistent rumor about CAC cards going away, and something is happening. But it's like one of those persistent rumors that never really seems to go anywhere, but kind of hangs out there. And as more modern things come available, then I'm sure there's going to be some kind of evolution there. So we'll see.
Yeah, someday it'll be true, right? I mean, that's
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You just got to wait it out.
Exactly. If you keep it going long enough, yes, eventually they will be replaced. So the rumor becomes truth.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing anything else. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Great presentation, great information.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it. If anyone comes back with any questions, hey, we know how to get a hold of you. And we'll pass those along. And for those, we'll make sure that, one, the videos get posted. And of course, that if there are any after this session questions, we'll make sure to get those answered and out as well. All right.
I think you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Hey, there's Jen.
Sorry about that. I've been cutting in and out. So I thank you so much. I'll echo Jeff's words, Dennis and Wasola. It was very cool. Do you have any recommendations for us to try and learn more about the KDC proxy for the group? If we wanted to set this up in a lab type environment, do you have any good tips for us?
Yeah, so the one that first link that I shared, I'll paste it into the chat here in a second. That's kind of a good jumping off point. That's going to have some of the context as well as kind of links out to the technical steps necessary to get started. And then obviously, as you find any gaps or any other questions, then just give us a shout and we could address the need or maybe evolve the offering to or the documentation to accommodate.
Great, thank you. It's great. This is great. Are you guys okay with us recording? I forgot to ask that earlier. I'm gonna stop the recording.
I'm fine with it.
If I said no, would it matter? No, I'm kidding.
It would not.